Hello, we are alive. Thank you so much for joining me. This really is an honor. Not only an honor to know you guys over many years now, but also to have you on my podcast. And you guys are kicking off a series that I'm going to have on relationships. And why am I going to be talking about relationships? Not only do I think they're the most important thing in the world, but there's also, me being a scientist, there's actually some science involved in them about trauma bonds and abandonment and rejection and intimacy and all these different things that we can use as tools to also never be outworked in our own relationships as well. And you guys are perfect examples of that. So we're going to be talking about relationships today, marriage, divorce, intimacy. And yes, we've decided we are going to use the word sex. We think that's actually very, very important. We're talking about trauma bonds, and you are welcomed on the Secrets of Success podcast with Dr. Shane Needham, where the theme is never be outworked. Follow me on Facebook, on Instagram, on LinkedIn. Visit my website at drsneedham.com. You can also follow me on my YouTube channel. You can follow all my podcasts on YouTube or Spotify, iTunes, SoundCloud. And you can call in today, and we will make all your calls anonymous. I won't say where you're from or what your name is. These are not only are Kelli and Aaron my friends, but they're considered counselors. I mean, not only from a church sense, but just from a friend sense. And Aaron actually has counseling experience and certificates and all that. We'll talk about that later. So if he can help anybody, I've never known two people like Kelli and Aaron. When I first met them, I met them and I was like, why are they always helping people? I'm serious. I never understood that. I know that sounds selfish of me, doesn't it? But it's if you can get helped by calling in and asking them questions, because you might not have the resources to go somewhere else. But if something intrigues you and you have a question or just a comment, please call in at 877-995-2111. So why did I start this podcast? We wanted to be a voice of a voice of scientists to a global community. And we wanted to do this with social media. And really what I'm learning is there's so much science in the laws of nature and the laws of relationships. And so that's why I'm going to be kicking off a lot of relationship podcasts over the next 4 or 5 weeks or the couple of months. So stay tuned. So Aaron and Kelli, again, a pleasure to have you guys on. So, first of all, why don't you introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about each one of you separately. Aaron, why don't you go first? And then Kelli, you can go after that. Tell us who you are, what you do. You can go as far back as you want. Go as far back as you think is important. And how'd we meet as well? So yeah. Aaron, why don't you've been on my podcast before, but we'd love to hear your story again. And by the way, I didn't say this. You guys have probably figured this out. Aaron and Kelli are married, by the way. They're husband and wife. So I wanted to say that. And so anyway, Aaron, go.
If we're not married, my wife is going to be really upset with me having another lady this close to me for this long.
Yes, exactly.
So my story, I was born at an early age. Let's see, we've been in ministry our entire married life. We met and started dating in Bible college and got married and jumped out of college and into ministry. And that's been kind of our journey ever since. We have 4 kids, 26 years we've been married. I need to do the quick, that's right. 26 years we've been married, and it's been a pretty incredible journey. You and I met through wrestling. My son was a wrestler, and you started picking up the coaching piece, and we had completely by happenstance an opportunity to spend a week together at a wrestling camp. And
oh man, that was great.
Yeah, and life has never been the same since.
No, it's been a whirlwind, and it's been fabulous. And so that's awesome. Kelli, tell your story a little bit. And I'm not sure exactly when we met, so I want to hear your story.
I'm from the Oregon coast, and then moved to Idaho for college and pretty much lived there my whole adult life except for 1 year. I've always been involved in the worship world, music, and was a worship pastor up until coming to this church about a year ago. And since October, became the small groups pastor here at this church. This church didn't have an intentional kind of small groups program or lifestyle. And so we launched that here, and it's been going great. We've been able to get 700 people plugged into groups since February. So we are building the plane as we're flying it, but we're trying to figure it out as we're going. But
Congratulations. And so, and Aaron, you're executive pastor at the Southeast Church there, correct?
I'm the lead pastor.
Lead pastor. Okay. So what does that mean?
I'm the boss.
You're the boss.
Is that what it means?
So you lead the sermons, you kind of decide the direction of the church. And, you know, Aaron doesn't tout these numbers, so I'm going to say it for him. But on Sunday, they had 9,000 people engaged in their church service. That is incredible. And kudos to both of you, Kelli and Aaron. You guys are an incredible team. And we're going to hear more about your story, but you guys both inspire me and give hope for so many situations. So I really, really appreciate it. And I hope that's what people find here is hope and inspiration. And so we have, you're a small groups pastor. So you lead that, Kelli, and you're the lead pastor, Aaron, of the church. And that's just awesome. So I know you, I know your role has kind of changed at that church, because when you were at the Real Life Church in Moscow, Aaron, a big role of yours was counseling.
Right.
And it doesn't sound like that's your official role anymore at Southeast, but I'm sure you're still involved in counseling people, just like Kelli is in an informal basis, probably, correct?
Yeah. So when we got here, they had a counseling center already established here. And so we didn't have to carry the pastoral counseling load like we have had to in the past.
Yeah. Okay.
The good news about that is, for me, like I can't get away from counseling, but it's just part of me. But I do it in very limited quantities here, and I can kind of handpick who that's going to be, and so I can focus on making sure that our leaders are as healthy as we can help that to be.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, Kelli, why don't you describe your counseling role at the church previously and now?
Well, I don't really ever think of it as counseling. I just think of it as it's just pastoring. It's part of what I do. You know, if you're not pastoring your people well, then what are you doing with your time? I think you get too caught up in your tasks. And so I have a team of 5 people right now on my staff, and then I have 700 people, and within that there's about 70 leaders. And so 20 of those I intentionally pour into, and I'm meeting with twice a month. And we're talking about real things, and we're seeing how I can help them grow, where they're stuck, trying to encourage them, things like that.
That is awesome. That is so. I have questions for both of you, and obviously, you guys were both called to pastoring. You guys were both called to a higher calling of serving others, and that is so inspirational to me. And I think it's actually very rare. You guys actually certainly both have gifts that God has given you to help others. Talk about, Kelli, I want you to go first. Why is it that you have always been wanting to help others and lead others and pastor others? And why does that get you out of bed in the morning? Why is that something that you like to do? Talk about that. Your love to help others.
Yeah. You know, I'll be honest and say, I grew up very introverted and very shy and very insecure. And I think for a long time, I felt like I didn't really have anything to offer anyone. That's the lie that I believed for a really long time, until one day that wasn't the case, until one day it mattered what I said, and it made a difference for those people. And I love to just see the lights turn on in people's minds when I'm talking about the Lord, or I'm talking about something that I see in them that maybe they don't quite believe yet, but I see it. And so to speak that over them and see them kind of rise to the occasion, there is nothing better than seeing people walk out their purpose.
Wow, that is so great to hear. So talk about that light bulb that went off one day. Do you want to share that? Was it one day all of a sudden? Was it gradual, or you just and talk about when that day was?
There isn't a specific instance that stands out per se, but more of just people always told me that I was a good listener. I mean, I was always that kid that the talkers would make fun of and go, "Kelly, you need to be quiet. You talk way too much," which of course I wasn't saying anything. And I was always that personality that I wasn't going to talk just to talk. If I didn't have anything to say, I wasn't really going to say anything. And so then to have people say that it mattered, that it made an impact when I did share something and that they walked away better for it, made me realize maybe I do need to share things that I have to say. So
That's amazing. So Aaron, why have you always wanted to help others, or did you not always want to? And I know you've shared with me sometimes you felt that your calling was being a pastor, even if you didn't want it, but you wanted to fulfill that. So talk about, is it your love for it? Is your duty of it? Talk about all that.
Well, for me, I can't. It seems like I can't help it. One of the things that we believe in is like God designs us to be a thing in the world, and it's not all the same thing, but we have to understand and embrace it because it will find expression, and it can be really unhealthy expression if you don't know what that is or how to set it free. But for me, I just am in my life constantly put in the path of people who are, for whatever reason, they're just stuck in their world, and I can't help getting involved in it. I can't be quiet about. I'm like, I have to help you. So I don't know if that is meeting a need in me or meeting a need in them, or if there's a combination of those things. What I know is those are the kind of conversations where I find over my life I have impacted people's lives. And I think one of the things that's really important, and just personally in me, is that as we grow and become more successful, whatever success looks like for us, that we don't forget to bring other people with us, because we didn't get there by ourselves, and we can't stand alone on top.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That inspirational. And it's interesting to think about how many times you've given me advice, Aaron, and um, you talk about you just can't help it. Number one, I've never felt that your advice was um, okay. I want to use the word unsolicited because you've given me unsolicited advice before. And by the way, it was the best advice I ever got in my life. I don't know if I'm willing to talk about it today. It was
Okay.
totally unsolicited, and it changed my life. Okay, the podcast is about you guys today. I might share that later, but it changed my life. So you do give unsolicited advice, but I've never felt trampled on by the advice that you give. You've always very well listened really well. And Kelly, I just have to say, I haven't been counseled by you. I have heard so many good things about you of people that have listened to you and talked with you and communicated with you, by the way. So kudos to both of you for inspiring
thanks.
literally tens of thousands of people. I mean, tens of thousands. So really, really good job. So I want to ask Kelly this one first. So, because I think women share things more easily than men. And I'm not saying that men haven't come to you for some of their trauma issues, Kelly, but it's probably more common for a woman to come to you, or maybe a couple, but it might be the woman, the wife, the spouse, the girlfriend, the daughter, whatever. And so, what are some of the common and difficult situations you've encountered in relationships with a female who's been talking to you?
Hmm. I think probably for women, a common theme is safety, not feeling safe. Um, and of course, that has fingers everywhere. If you don't feel safe emotionally, you're not going to feel safe physically. And so, yeah, that's probably been the most common one. But that's been the case for men too.
Yeah. So that's interesting you say that. That's important. I'm actually going to be talking about some of those things from a woman's perspective that we usually think that men deal with trauma and not safety in a relationship. I'm going to be talking about men, how women have talked about men not feeling safe in relationships. So talk about that, Kelly. What I think we'll talk about how a woman would not feel safe in a relationship, and then how a man, how you've seen, would not feel safe in a relationship.
Okay. So you want me to give examples?
Yeah, give examples.
So here's an easy one. A husband just being snarky, or things that they might say to his wife that have an edge, or just little remarks that tear her down rather than taking opportunities to build her up. After a while, you start to build a wall against your husband, and then he wants to be intimate, and you're kind of like, that's the last thing I want to do with you.
Sure.
And the last thing that you deserve, and you're not getting in. And I think the same is true for guys. I mean, I've heard several stories, some people that we've been very close to, where that is the same, like in reverse. That's how the woman is to the husband, and so he won't let her in.
Right. And so how much of that do you think is communication issues? Obviously, there are communication issues. Obviously, we know that, and then communication is huge in a marriage. How much of that is unprocessed trauma from childhood?
I think so. I'll just speak for me. I know my own journey. A huge percentage of that was unprocessed trauma that I carried over into my marriage, and then things that Aaron would do or say, I would use that as a filter to decide, oh yeah, I'm putting him in the same camp that happened to me. And now, granted, it didn't necessarily mean that wasn't true, that he wasn't doing those things. But of course, that was my lens to filter everything through. And it was a major obstacle. If you don't feel safe in your marriage, like, how can you have a healthy marriage?
Absolutely. So then what would your response be physically, or how would then you respond to that? It's like, hey, I don't feel safe. Aaron may have said something that caused a trigger from my childhood, or whatever.
Yeah.
Maybe Aaron did say something that wasn't good. Who knows?
Yeah.
Then what was your response to him?
Well, 9 times out of 10, it was very volatile. And I think my counselor talks about how psychologically you do this thing when you're triggered, where is it the hypothalamus, which is where like the logical stuff comes through? Prefrontal cortex. That kind of basically goes away, and all of the things go towards your amygdala, which is all of your emotions. So you have
You're doing great, babe.
Thank you. So there's no more logic. It just goes straight to emotion. And so I would absolutely wig out, yelling. And it didn't even matter what I was doing. All I was doing was my body was saying, you better protect yourself from this guy. So say whatever you have to do to scare him, to make him feel bad, to keep him at a distance. And I did all of that, everything I could do so that he would not come close in any way, emotionally, physically, all of that.
Okay. So I get that. And that's very common. That's what I've heard too, is talking and some of my own experience as well. So you yell and scream at him. And do you think that that's actually a response to say, okay, now he's going to leave me alone, so he's not going to want sex. He won't want intimacy.
Right.
Do you think that is somehow subconsciously saying, get the heck away from me?
Totally. It totally is.
Yeah. So Aaron, by the way, the more vulnerable you guys are, the more I see more comments, and our Facebook is lighting up. So keep doing it. This is phenomenal. Aaron, so describe from a man's perspective and I'm not saying, by the way, you weren't at any fault, by the way, Aaron. You might have said some words. Who knows, right?
I mean, maybe.
There was some words, yes.
And I get that, okay? There's always sometimes there's resentment that builds up. So then, Aaron, what would your response be to some of that volatility? What would you do?
Yeah, so the process for me is, let's say we're coexisting. We're not really connected. We're not really at each other, but we're not really connected. And I want to connect, and I connect through sex, through physical intimacy. And so I go to her, and she's like, we're not connected. We can't have sex. And I'm like, we're not connected. That's why we should have sex. And
right.
Right. So that's just the reality of it. And so she rebuffs or, pushes away or whatever, and then I feel rejected, and I feel disrespected, and like, you don't think I'm man enough for you, which creates insecurity. Then I get driven to, well, now I've got to prove to you that I'm man enough. So I start trying to posture an alpha male up, which does the exact opposite to her, because what she needs from me is connection. She doesn't need me to alpha her. And so she pushes away further. And so I'm like, but look at how awesome I am. And then it gets to a point where we start flipping lids, and she's tearing me down. And I'm like, let me tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to make myself big by making you feel small.
Mhm.
And that becomes this big wicked cycle of rejection and abandonment and disconnection. And in the end, all we wanted was to be connected.
Right.
Right. So I love that. And by the way, I don't think, I've ever seen you guys more happy, by the way. I can see it. And I'm not an expert at these things, and people can hide really well, but you guys seem to be really, really happy. And I'm really happy for both of you. And congratulations to that, by the way.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Things are
So-
better than ever.
That is so awesome. It brings chills up my spine. I have goosebumps right now, and that's amazing. And so, Aaron, let's talk about a couple of things before we talk about brokenness and how it comes from loneliness, which are your words that I will use for the rest of my life. I strongly believe in them. So there's a few things that we talk about in life where I want to get in our societies where I want to get, and you're really good at this, Aaron, by the way, and the churches that you lead are really good about this. Let's be careful of what we call an alpha male and what is an alpha male. An alpha male does not mean they're toxic. An alpha male does not mean that they're going to break somebody down. An alpha male is somebody who's secure in themselves and doesn't have to prove it, knows what they want, and they know how to get it. That's it. What we say in our society is an alpha male is somebody that's going to go beat everybody down. No, that's exactly the opposite of an alpha male. An alpha wolf or a silverback gorilla, they know who the leader is. They don't have to tell anybody. They don't have to show it. They just know.
Right.
They're very secure in themselves. Now, do I understand the insecurity that it causes when your wife turns you down for sex? Oh, yeah. Yeah, you feel like you're not man enough. And it's like, oh, I'll show her, right?
Yeah.
So, great being vulnerable. So Aaron, what are so we kind of went from Kelli talking about females and not feeling safe, then to kind of turn that to males. But what have you encountered with, a lot of them, and you counsel women and men in the past, but what are some of the common and difficult situations you've encountered in relationships? And just talk about it just like Kelli did there.
Yeah. So I think there's a couple of themes. I mean, it all is rooted in what we're actually trying to say versus what the words that are coming out of our mouth. Like there's a disconnection there. I think that for men, from the men's side, many of them feel like their wives want them to go out and conquer the world, but as soon as they make an effort toward it, their wife is going to point out 10 things that they didn't do right, or how they didn't measure up on that. Like there's this underlying current of critique or dissatisfaction, and I think men and women really just want to feel like they're enough, and that really gets in the way of feeling that way. And so he's constantly like checking with her. Was that good? Was that good? I don't know. I don't even know how to put clothes on anymore,
Right. Yeah.
And so it's just this, and it happens over time. And then all of a sudden, what I've observed over the years is she looks at him and goes, who even is he? And like at one level, he has a responsibility to own and grow and, always be working at those kind of things. But at another level, like some of that she invested in. And so that's kind of, and it goes both ways. I'm just speaking strictly from the men's side. Like we have such an opportunity to celebrate what our spouses are or resent what they're not. And I think for me, that's been like the number one thing that I've tried to help people with is just celebrate what your spouse is. Then you don't have to resent what they're not.
Well, Aaron, I want to, I think it was one of your last sermons that you and Kelli were at in Moscow, Idaho. And I don't remember the exact details of everything, and I don't remember the actual topic, but I remember your words. And you've always talked about how words live, how what you say, and by the way, I've learned that. And when I learned that my words live and the things that I tell my kids, do we always think our kids are hard workers, for example? No, but I tell them they are.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
they live it when they say,
Mhm.
hey, you're a hard worker. They live it, and so the words that you tell people is what they live. One of the things that you said about spousal relationships was, yeah, maybe your husband does want, you're talking to wives. And by the way, anybody who's ever been to a service of Aaron's, he is equally hard on wives as he is husbands. Okay. So there's no bias there. Zero. We all have that responsibility. But he said something, yeah. So, you don't want your husband sitting on the couch watching football for 8 hours on Sunday or however long on Saturday. Just tell him he's a hard worker and he probably won't. It was something like that. And it's true.
Yeah.
But if the response from the wife is, you're so lazy, you watch football all day on Sunday, that just is not going to, then he will be lazy.
Yeah. One of the things that Kelly said to me one time that was so good is sometimes, the grass is greener on the other side of the fence because you didn't water your own grass.
Absolutely.
Like how did you steward it? How did you care for it? Did you invite them to become, or are you just constantly pointing out flaws? Because being a critic is like the lowest form of communication. It's easy to do that.
It's so easy. So why do you think that there's people like that? Aaron and Kelly, I ask you this, and we're going off topic a little bit, and that's what I want to do. It's important. Why are there people that say those things? Hey, you got to water your own grass, but they're either not willing or able to do them. Why is that?
Gosh, I think there's a myriad of reasons.
Do they not want to? Do they?
Nobody wakes up in the morning and goes, man, I hope my life sucks today.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like we all want happiness. We all want joy. We all want contentment. We all want those things. I think some people are willing to do what it takes to get there. Some people are not. It just like with your physical self, your emotional self and your physical self kind of parallel each other, right? Like everybody wants to be in shape and look good, but just not very many people are willing to do what it takes to get there.
Yeah. Well, by the way, congratulations, Aaron. I'm going to share this. Aaron is down 40 pounds.
Yeah.
He's been working hard.
Yeah, and you changed my workout, and I can hardly walk. So for a week, but I'm doing it.
You asked. Well, I hope it's working. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. That's amazing, Aaron. And but you're right. Our emotional selves and our spiritual selves, it's all connected to our physical selves, and I agree. Yeah.
So I think people emotional work is hard. Yeah. It's really hard, and like you go home from the counselor and sit there and drool on yourself, and everybody's like, "How are you doing?" And I'm like, "Give me an hour. Not just a minute. Give me an hour, because I need to just sit and regroup." But it's worth it in the long run. I just finished a great book called The Compound Effect. I'm sure you've read it.
I've heard of it. I haven't read it.
Great book, but he talks about how little changes over time start to stack up, and it makes big differences over time that weren't there. It doesn't feel, it's so small and incremental. It feels like it's not changing anything at first, but if you stay with it, like that's the way like emotional health happens. It's little by little. And then pretty soon somebody goes, man, it's just so much easier to be around you. Or, oh, wow, it's been so long since you've gotten angry. And you're like, I guess so. I've never really thought about it.
Yeah. Well, so again, Aaron, your words here, and you told me once, and I tell so many people this, and I give you credit each time, by the way, but all brokenness stems from loneliness. And I totally agree with that. And I want to give you your story that I've observed. Okay. So if you allow, so brokenness can be obviously addictions. It can be, really tough things, pornography and overeating. It comes from loneliness. And when you started your journey of losing all your weight, Aaron, just recently, I knew you were one of the happiest times it's ever been in your life. And that's amazing. And I can see it in you, and I can see it in Kelly. I absolutely can. So you guys are just absolutely incredible. You inspire me. You're both so happy. And I mean, here's one thing I struggle with the church. Obviously, we have a generous God. Most of us pray at no matter our congregation. Most of us pray. And here's what I absolutely believe, and there's research on this through Martin Seligman, Dr. Martin Seligman. He's kind of the father of positive psychology. Grateful people are happy people. So how come we see so many broken people in the church? We're always praying, we're always grateful, we're always thankful. I always say my prayers and I'm thankful for so many things. And even if I had a bad day, it usually turns into, oh man, it could be worse, right? But how come we see, Kelli, I want you to take this one. How come we see so much brokenness in the church when we're absolutely taught to be grateful and to be grateful to God for everything that we have? Why do you think that is?
Well, I just have to speak from personal experience. We live in a time where we have amazing professionals who can help us through trauma. And I think that there's this stigma in the church that, if you're Christian, then you just pray and you just have peace and are healed. Now, can God do that? He sure can.
Yeah.
Does he all the time? No, just like, if you have a sickness, you can pray that God will heal you, and he can, or you can go to the doctor also. And so I think that there's a lot of Christians who really think that they need to act like they're healed inside.
I
And
understand. Yeah.
yeah, and I know for me and Aaron most recently, I've gone through therapy for so many years since I graduated high school. I lost my mom when I was 18, so there was stuff right from the get-go that I needed to deal with, and just my relationship with her, and that I carried into my marriage. And I just think either people aren't given the permission or encouraged to go and get help, or they have believed this lie that, well, it'll get better, it's fine, I'm fine. But guess what? You may not be consciously thinking about your trauma, but your body remembers it, and eventually you will have to deal with it. So
Yeah. Well, that leads to something right into our next question. It's like you eventually have to deal with. So you're talking about some of your childhood traumas, and
yeah.
I'm sorry for all of that, Kelli. That's a lot to overcome. That's a lot to overcome. And you know what? People say, well, when will you be healed? You'll always be healing. It's
Yeah.
always going to be something to deal with. But you can, once you learn to process it and you know what that feeling feels like and you know what triggers are, I'm sure it's getting better.
Absolutely.
That leads to our next question. Is like you have some trauma that you're processing, and you talk about your own marriage, the struggles, the successes, what kept you from healing, and then what led you to healing. Those are long questions, but go. The floor is yours.
Yeah. So, I'll just be really transparent, and I don't want to give my mom a bad name, because my mom had her own trauma that she was from a generation that you just deal with it and move on. And I wish that she was alive so that we could maybe have the chance to talk through some of her stuff, but she is not. So my home wasn't a safe place with her. My dad is just amazing, not perfect, but amazing. But my mom was not a safe person, and I never felt accepted. I never felt loved. And again, it doesn't mean she didn't, but my reality was she didn't love me. And I also felt that from my two grandmothers. So if your maternal figures in your world don't love you, or you perceive it that way, well, then how can you be lovable? So I carried that into my marriage. And I just couldn't believe the things that he told me about myself. So I would just continue to push him away. And that's kind of how it started. And then you bring sex into the picture.
So that was from the beginning. Are you saying
that was from the beginning?
Oh my goodness. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, that's from the beginning. And then you bring sex into the picture. And I was raised in a very conservative home where my mom loved Days of Our Lives. She loved to watch Days of Our Lives soap opera. And I remember I would walk into the living room. There might be a love scene on. She'd see me see it and say, don't do that. And so that's all I ever heard. So don't do that. Okay, got it. I will never do that. And I was a virgin when we got married.
Yeah.
But how on your wedding night is it now supposed to be good and wonderful and beautiful? Well, it doesn't work like that.
Absolutely.
So we had some issues.
Well, because even if you thought it could get there, it's not on your first, your first go around. It's not wonderful and beautiful. It's awkward and
Absolutely.
terrible, and you're like, "What? This is what it was all about."
This
Yeah.
is what I saved myself for.
And Aaron's thinking, uh-oh.
Yeah. I'm gonna show you I'm okay.
Right, exactly. Oh my goodness. Well, thank you for being transparent. And so you brought those struggles into your relationship, Kelli, and that trauma of not being loved, basically not being approved. And so I read a really, really good book. I can't remember what it was called, but it basically came down to all relationship brokenness stems from abandonment and rejection issues. And that's what you're describing.
Yeah.
I have my own abandonment and rejection issues.
Yep.
Am I saying my parents were perfect? No. And they obviously, they have you talk to them now, they had their own traumas that they had to deal with,
Yes.
And so you have those struggles, you have those abandonment and rejection issues. So then you kind of continue to do that with Aaron. What really kept you from healing? Can you name one thing that kept you from healing? Did you want to heal? Did you want to fix that relationship? Did you know what a fixed relationship looked like? That's a lot to process. Go.
Yeah. Here's the reality. For so long, I just was resigned to the fact that this is just how I am and this is how it's going to be. And I have a choice. We can either get divorced, which didn't really line up with our beliefs. And for me, being in ministry, there was ripple effects. It didn't just affect us and our children. It affected the church. And I could never understand how people in ministry did it. I don't know if they didn't consider it or it just wasn't that big a deal. For me, it really was. So it was almost like a fence of protection around our marriage that kept us married.
Wow.
And so for me, I really felt like, well, I mean, I guess we're just going to have to be miserable. That's what we are going to have to do. And we'll hang in there and hopefully we won't pass this on to our children. Right.
Is that going to happen? No.
Exactly.
Because they don't see what's going on.
No, they don't see. Yeah. And so, I went to therapy. I went to a sex therapist. I tried hormones. I did everything. And really what it came down to for me was it had to do with safety. And it didn't have to do with sex. It had to do with safety. And because what's interesting is,
did you learn that, Kelli? Did you learn that in therapy or something, or did you read it in self-development? Okay,
I learned it in therapy, and I had an
Kelli, that is not easy. Kudos to you.
No, it's not. It's super painful and it's so much work. I hated going to counseling. And then every time I'd come back from counseling, Aaron would say, how'd it go? How'd it go? Tell me everything. Because he's an Enneagram 8. Let's see some results. Yeah, let's do this. I am not an Enneagram 8.
Are you a 2?
I'm a 4.
You're 4. Okay. So you're an independent. Okay, I got it.
Yes. And I Enneagram 4s don't feel their feelings. They are their feelings. They are their feelings. And so, the more that he would hound me on how therapy was going, the more I just dug in my heels. Cause you need time and people who are their feelings need extra time.
Yeah. By the way, Kelli, that's true. An 8 doesn't need time. It's now.
Right. I know.
So I'm an 8 as well, by the way. So
I know you are.
Just make it happen.
Yeah. So for me, it was all about this aha moment of that it has to do with safety with Aaron. And I actually had, transparent moment here. I had a therapy session with a counselor, and it was called a dissociative something where she had me close my eyes and I talked to myself when I was little, because she asked me, go back to the time when you first realized, oh, you're on your own. You are going to have to take care of you. And I was 5. And so I get emotional talking about it.
That's okay.
The 40-year-old Kelli, 46-year-old Kelli had to go back and talk to 5-year-old Kelli and say, you know what, honey, your life turns out really good and you end up with a man who would do anything for you, and who will love you even when it's hard, and who will hang in there and will prove over and over and over that he is with you, that you are enough. And so you don't have to have a wall around you anymore. In fact, you're hurting me, the 40-year-old Kelli now. You protected me all this time, but thank you, but I don't need that anymore. And that actually, it sounds weird. It helped. Like, it helped whatever was going on inside. It was the first step for me to say, oh, I don't need to protect myself from him anymore. He's actually on my side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is amazing. I'm either going to have to turn off the video and audio, or I'm going to start crying as well. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to cry. I'm actually crying right now, but I'm here. Guys have bigger tear ducts, so mine won't flow. So that's amazing. That is, but wow, what hard work that is. And for somebody that you talk about your Enneagram type, and we won't get into Enneagrams. You viewers that are watching online, and by the way, Facebook is lighting up with some comments and stuff that I might want to get to. And if you're making those Facebook comments, I can't get to them while I'm being a host. If you want to call in, we will talk to you. I see they're really good comments. Call in. You can call in anonymously. I won't say who you are. Call in. But Kelli, your feelings are you. That's who describes you as a number 4. I totally get that. And, how hard that I'm trying to say this in a non-8 way, by the way, but it's hard for you to do those things, to go to counseling, to fix things, because you're all about feelings. You're not about logic. And those are, by the way, great traits. Those are great traits. Okay. And so it's almost unbelievable that you did that. It's very inspiring. And to think about what kept you guys together because of maybe the church, just amazing that you did that. And wow. And you know what I can say? I know this because Aaron and I have had some pretty private conversations, and you are correct. You have a man that will love you no matter what.
Yeah.
And he would die for you and protect you. You probably understand that now. It's hard to understand that coming from an 8. I've had to learn to talk to people as an 8. I can talk to Aaron. Aaron can talk to me, and we're not scared of each other. But a lot of people are scared of 8s.
Yes, you're intimidating.
Yes, and so I've learned through my own counseling on how to communicate with non-8s. And so, Kelli, what a great story! What a great story. So, Aaron, I want to hear your side of this. Talk about your marriage. Talk about, Aaron, I want you to seriously, I know this is really private. I want you to go back to your wedding night. And I want you to start there.
Okay.
And talk about your struggles and your successes and what your thoughts were, what kept you from healing, because you probably had some trauma too, and what led you to healing.
So because we come from a Christian background, the wedding night we fumbled our way through it. Like there wasn't just that we didn't have a lot of experience. It was that nobody talked to us about it. They're like, man, you'll figure it out, I guess. Well, maybe. And then maybe this will really be a wedge that gets driven into our relationship, which ultimately it was, because like my expectations and her expectations were not the same entering into a marriage relationship. Right. And I just was stunned that she didn't want to have sex as much as I did. I was stunned. Right. Then what are we doing here? Because you know what I mean? Like,
yes, I know
that, and that's just where I was. I mean, I was 20 when we got married, so forgive that. But that was, if that's not going to be something that we agree on, we need to call it. So there's that. For me, the problem was, I think both of us. But I know for me, for sure, I leveraged sex as I weaponized it in our marriage. It became proof that she loved me. And it was like, you can say whatever you want to say, but if you don't put out, you don't love me.
Mm-hmm.
I understand that.
And that's not fair for her, right? That's not fair, because there's 1,000,001 factors. Some of them have to do with me. Some of them have nothing to do with me. And if I don't honor that in her, Here's the funny thing. When I let go of trying to drive for sex, she wants to have sex more.
Dude, isn't that weird? I don't.
And I'm like,
I can't explain it either.
it's the most ridiculous thing.
You know what's interesting though? We go back to brokenness and loneliness and what sex is and what it's not. And let's remove the actual sexual act and intimacy. Okay, let's just put it this way: most guys, especially eights, they're not born for intimacy. They're just not. They're not wired for it. They want the final goal, and that is sex, right?
Mhm.
And that's how, especially what I've understood is a lot of eights, their number one love language are words of affirmation and touch. Of course they are. Okay, that's just, I suppose those are probably yours too, Aaron. And so,
That's why she laughed at me just now.
right, exactly. If somebody says, "You're my knight in shining armor," oh yeah, that's just gonna.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. Exactly. But Kelly, when you do tell him that, you wrap him around your finger. Did you know that?
I do know this. I know this now. And I have to use my powers for good now.
Absolutely. I'm just saying, and the power of touch, you'll wrap him around your finger. But anyway, we're going to be talking more about those in future podcasts because it's true when you learn, and I don't think it's manipulative at all. If you learn your partner's love language. And when you are willing to sit down with them, and this is part of intimacy. So somebody told me, actually my therapist told me this, intimacy starts with getting your partner a cup of coffee in the morning.
Yeah.
And when you learn that, I didn't learn that. It took me years to learn that. And I'm processing it now. When you learn that, then the sexual act is so much easier. And by the way, enjoyable. And so, but I think, Aaron, would you say that being a goal-oriented person, like an 8 is you thought that the final act was how she loved you, not if she brought you coffee, not if she sat with you and watched a movie with you, not if she went to the gym and worked out with you, whatever it is, whatever that intimacy bond is, or talked about your day or whatever, it had to be sex. Would you say that that's correct?
For huge parts of our marriage, I think like she could do all those things and it was all good, but if it didn't ultimately lead to the grand finale, then it was all for nothing. And that's the part that, like, one of the things I learned about my wife is she can switch directions on a dime emotionally. And so even if she's priming the pump earlier in the day, and that she's doing all the right things, and then she has one conversation in the afternoon that sideswipes that, and then she's like, I don't have it in to give. And I was like, you don't love me. Obviously you don't love me.
Absolutely.
Because I love you, I get over it. Well,
yeah,
I can. I don't. I mean, that's the upside of being an 8. I don't hold on to those things too long. But for her, that was like, and it's real for her. That's not. And I can either demean her and cause shame in that, or I can nurture that and hopefully have it happen less.
So how did you, I want to talk about you, Aaron, then I want to talk about you, Kelly, because you guys are both very good about saying it's both of the spouse's responsibility in the relationship. It's not one or the other. There's both responsibilities there. And we'll get to that. I think that's very biblical. So Aaron, how would you nurture that? What would you try to understand? We hear about the proverb of seek to understand. So how would you try to understand that? And how would you nurture that in Kelly?
Yeah. So there's two things that are going on, and this is probably going to be out of order the way it should be, but it's the way my mind works. The first thing I have to do is go, it's okay that we're not going to have sex.
Yes.
Tomorrow is another day.
I love it. Yes.
And I'm still not really good at that one.
Well, here's how I would process. How can I have process support is maybe next time. And you can even say that to your partner now, or maybe tomorrow. Now, here's the problem. If there is months in between that intimacy and that sex, you'll never think there's a next time.
Right.
And an 8 will not think there's a next time.
yeah.
Right.
And so there is no tomorrow. There's like, no, my life is ending.
Yeah. There's no guarantees.
There's no guarantees. And
Yeah.
so it looks like you're processing that. So how would you process that? And then Kelly, what would you do in return to make sure that Aaron knew that he loved you, that you weren't abandoning him and rejecting him?
So the way that I try to process it now is to let that go and then to come back around and go, okay, um, I need to help. I need to understand where she's at, what's going on, or at least give her the opportunity to talk about it. Like she may not want to talk about it, and that's okay too. But at least to meet her where she's at. And if that's give her space, it gives her space. If that's to have a conversation, it's to have a conversation. But from my response, one of the things, and again, the more I let go of the push towards the end, um, the more she responds towards the end.
I totally get it. So, Kelly, how would you respond? Like, let's say you're not up to it. It's getting nighttime. He probably wants something,
Yeah.
and you're just not up to it. So,
Yeah.
how do you respond now, and maybe a more healthy self than you were previously without your unprocessed trauma, to make sure that he still knows that you love him and that you do want him and you desire him,
Yeah.
but you're not in the mood or whatever it is.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that?
So it's all about communication. And I have to say that if he didn't react in a healthy way, obviously, like, it wouldn't work. It wouldn't matter if I said, babe, I'm either not feeling up to it tonight, or, something happened earlier in the day. And of course, as a 4, I'm wrecked by it. Now he could say, oh, sure, oh, it's one more night. I mean, he could react that way, but we have gotten to the
I
point.
have reacted
Yes,
that way.
yes.
It's not recently, but I have done that in our
Oh,
past.
totally. And like, our MO before was he would react that way. And my MO before would be to put him off, and I would stay up late hoping he'd be asleep by the time that I came to bed. And like a lot of women do that.
Yep.
Yes. And so now it's communicating, just so he knows that I'm not intentionally putting him off, or that I haven't forgotten about him. Even if I sent him a text, like, let's say, because we have our daughter and her new husband and our teenage daughter still live with us. And so let's say I can't say, hey, babe, I don't feel up to it tonight, because everyone's right there. So I'll shoot him a text from across the room. I am just not. Would it be okay if we planned on this tomorrow? Then he knows, okay, she hasn't forgotten about me and she's not trying to put me off, and he can give me grace for that. Now, again, 10 years ago, that wouldn't have worked. That still wouldn't have worked.
Well, she would have either just been silent and done nothing, or picked a fight.
Yeah, I totally get it.
Yeah, picked a fight to sabotage it.
Absolutely, because then you could say, "See, I told you I didn't want to sleep with you."
Yeah,
totally.
Now I'm not in the mood. You ruined it.
Yep.
That's a great little.
It is
dagger,
and it works.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely,
it just doesn't sustain a healthy relationship.
No, it causes resentment, it causes a wall in between the relationship. So, kudos to both of you. So, I want to get back to, you didn't know, we're a little bit off topic, but this is great. So, you recently had a daughter that got married. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And you earlier talked about that first night, wedding night, that you don't know what to expect. So are you saying, as parents, we should talk to our kids about what they should expect, or what to do, or on their wedding night? Or tell me about that.
Well, you should at least give them the opportunity to talk about it. Like,
yeah,
I had conversations with both of them, and I'm sure you did too, but we didn't communicate about that, but I just felt like it was like hey, are you okay? Do you have any questions? And there's those things that you don't think about, like, dealing with the fact that it's going to be painful the first time, and how do you help mitigate that? And, they just don't think about it.
Right.
So who's going to help them? Who's going to help them know?
I agree. It's one of those things that I think even in the church that we don't talk about, and you just assume that things are going to go well, and it usually ends up not going well because nobody knows what to expect.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it is our Western society too, and I'm not blaming anybody. We're responsible for this, but Hollywood portrays it as it's the greatest thing in the world, and it's going to be the best day in the world, and it's going to be all roses, all wine glasses, and rainbows. And so when, especially people, well, Kelly, like a number 4, that live in that reality, when that doesn't happen, it's crushing.
It is.
Mhm.
Whereas an 8 will just say, well, we just got to change something.
Yeah, let's go try something different. We'll get it figured out.
Even
Yeah,
if
but the thing is, like, what I carried into it is, man, is there something wrong with me that I can't get this figured out? And so
Sure.
then that creates that insecurity that pushes me towards wanting to have more physical intimacy, which then hits the cycle again. And yeah, we didn't feel like, and I'm sure it's not true, but we didn't feel like we had a space where we could talk with people about that in a real way.
Yeah. Can you guys give advice to parents and to maybe churches on what space should we give in our societies or in the church or in a home to talk about those kind of things to our children? That it's got to come from the parents, right? I mean, that's
Yeah.
probably the most healthy way. And so how should that be talked about, or what space should we give?
Well, I think sex is beautiful. It's not a 4-letter word. So like it's covenantal between men and women. And that's beautiful. It's beautiful in God's eyes. Sex it's more than nerve endings and body parts. It's the mingling of souls. Those are, we've got to help our kids see the beauty of it. Cause what they do, if they don't, especially it's so easy in today's world. If they want to learn about sex, they just go watch porn.
Right.
But
Right.
porn's not sex education. It's not
It's certainly not intimacy, and it's certainly not
right,
inspired at
right,
all. Like, and
right.
I always forgot the nerve endings part. I've always tried to remember that when I quote you. I always remember the body parts, but now it's nerve endings and body parts.
Yeah, yeah.
That's not just
It's the mingling of souls. That's the part. Like that's the part that you're driving for. And the truth is, especially when a guy is young and he's got lots of testosterone running through his body, he wants to get to the to the climax. And what I would say is, if you have the climax without the mingling of souls, you're still left wanting.
always.
And
You will always be broken and lonely if you don't have the mingling of souls and that intimacy.
yeah,
Oh gosh. And
yeah,
and I'm sure you guys have learned that over these last few years where you guys have healed, and sex and intimacy is a beautiful thing that I absolutely know God designed. Absolutely know God
yeah.
designed.
Yeah, and there were seasons in our marriage where after it was over, like we need to have sex. After it was over, I felt more guilty than when we started,
Totally get it.
just because there was no connection. It was like I was using her, and that feels yucky for the person that I love.
Well, I'm going to be very vulnerable here too. I have a really good friend. He's probably even watching right now. I'm not going to say who it is, but he's like, I'm going to tell my kids, what I would tell my friends, and how they know if they've got the right partner and if they've had the right intimacy throughout the day. After you're done, do you want to put your pants on and get out of the house, or do you want to snuggle? So what's interesting when you think about that scientifically and hormonally, so if you don't have intimacy, even with a man, oxytocin will not be produced. Oxytocin is the calming hormone that causes you to sit there and want to be with somebody relationally after all the other endorphins, dopamine, and all those happen during the actual sexual act. But if you don't have intimacy, oxytocin will not be produced. So you will want to just bolt and say, ooh, that didn't feel good. I'm out of here. On to the next. And so I'm glad you guys are experiencing that. That's awesome. I think that's really, really good. So we talked about how important actually sex and intimacy is to a relationship, and how we do know it's God, designed by God. So Aaron, another tough question, and to you too, Kelly, you guys both gone to Bible college. Aaron, you've led quite a few churches at this point. And I wanted to get your thoughts on, it's a big issue in the church. And I know many people in very conservative or not so conservative religions, or whatever you want to call it, in church, conservative churches, that stay married in awful situations, trauma, abuse, adultery, addictions. And by the way, I strongly believe in marriage. I believe that it should only happen once with you, if at all possible. Aaron, I want to hear your thoughts on divorce.
All right. So
you've talked to me about it before, and
let me begin with this.
Okay.
I believe that God would always want us to push toward reconciliation.
Okay.
Now, for a number of reasons, that's not always possible. And that's when you have to look at something else. If there's abuse in a home, you do not have to stay in that home. If there's infidelity in the relationship, you do not have to stay in that relationship. Now, again, if you can and there's healing, I think that God would always want reconciliation. That doesn't mean that that's always possible.
Yeah. So, Aaron, how you've told me this before in our private conversations. You've said that your views on divorce have actually changed over time since you've gone to Bible college and seen a whole bunch of different types of relationships and marriages. Have you talk about that? How your opinion has changed on divorce?
Yeah, so there's a whole big Greek word study that I won't bore you with to walk through on that. But a piece of it is when I was young, it was like only an affair, only adultery. That's the only
Yeah.
time that for in. Well, listen, if the issue with marriage and staying married is it's covenantal. It's covenantal before God. And once you understand that, then covenantal violation is grounds for separation. Um, that's bigger than just adultery. The covenant, like I promise to love, honor, and cherish her. Right? I promise in sickness and in health. If I'm beating her up every day, that is none of those things.
Physically or emotionally.
Yeah.
Right.
That is none of those things. And so when is the covenant violated beyond repair? And I think, Jesus says that God's desire was never for divorce, but he gave us a certificate of divorce because of the hardness of their hearts. Like that there is a point where our heart becomes so callous and it may be, and this again is so complicated, but it may be that the callousness is just between the two people. But I believe that and this is a big if two people are both willing to totally let go of their own agenda and really submit themselves to the lordship of God, if both people are 100% willing to do that, then I think that any two people can stay married. It's just it's hard, and not very many people are able
Yeah.
to really do that.
So
And by the way, do that and not at the expense of quality of life.
sure.
Like you don't have to be which is where we were at, right? I guess we'll just have to grin and bear it. It can actually be really, really good.
Yeah. So, my thoughts are going crazy. And it's good. It's good. So when you talk about, Kelli, when you were in your marriage and it was not as good as it is now for sure. And you just said, oh, this is how it's going to be. I mean, we call that a closed mindset. That's something that eights don't have usually, by the way, that there's so many possibilities with an eight that anybody can change and anybody can do the work if they just want to work hard. Did you find that after you made that decision to say, and you were talking to the 5-year-old Kelli, that, hey, I want to change this. I want to get better. I want our relationship to be better. Did you find that actually translated into a whole bunch of different facets of your life as well, and that you could change other things as well?
I think the first thing that it did for me was it gave me hope. When you don't have hope, like you're done. And I felt like I had tried everything. I read all the books. I took medication. I did therapy. I talked to people. There wasn't anything left for me to try. Little did I know that it had to do with, I had some inner work I hadn't dealt with yet. Yes, it did open doors to, intimacy isn't obviously just physical marriage intimacy. It translated to relationships with the different girlfriends that I have, and how much I would let them in or how I didn't. And so yes, it did open up lots of doors to other things.
Yeah, that's great. So you guys have seen so many different things and so many different relationships. You know, small groups, a big part of the churches that you guys have led in the past. And so would you say that talking to a couple or talking to one of them and even getting one of their stories and trying to believe it and pull it apart and so on and so forth, that you can predict if they'll stay married or not, or if they'll get divorced, or if they'll heal? Think you guys can?
So yeah, so John Gottman in his book "What Makes Marriages Last" says he can tell within 15 minutes of if a marriage is going to make it
Are we
or
talking
not.
about the four horsemen there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's my thing. I just have this optimistic belief in people's potential to change.
Yeah.
So can I predict, like, if nothing changes, where's this headed?
Sure.
Yeah.
Good point. Yeah. That's a good.
But I do believe that people can be better. Like people can change. They can
I believe that too.
become what they're intended to become.
Yeah. Well, you know what's interesting is a couple of psychologists. One of them is John Gottman, you know, from University of Washington. Him and his wife have done great stuff about marriage. I was actually when I was at Washington State University in 1990, they sent a whole bunch of surveys to recently married people that wanted them to sign up for this marriage course that this guy was doing. Nobody knew John Gottman back then, but it was John Gottman trying to do surveys of these people that were just recently married. And I knew couples that had taken them. And so he was part of the research back when people were in their 20s, 1990. But the question I have is, so he talks about the four horsemen: defensiveness, let's see, stonewalling, critique, and contempt.
Mhm.
It sounds like you guys might have had all of those.
Oh yeah.
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 Wow. And
Listen, my wife's grit is why we're still married today. Just flat out. There was no reason for us to stay together other than she just refused to quit.
wow.
Uh,
That's awesome, Kelly.
And I see it completely different.
Let's hear it.
I see it completely different because I think there was a point in my life in my marriage where I'm like, I give up. Not give up, we're going to get divorced, because of course I had that fence around it. No, we can't actually get divorced. I give up, we're just going to be miserable. We're just going to be miserable. And I hope we can fake it enough on the outside to get a job at a church, because that's what we do. So I think Aaron is so loyal and faithful. He was not going to go anywhere. And every time I tried to sabotage it to make him leave, he proved again, I'm not going anywhere. So I think you're the one who has grit. I think we both have grit.
we're gritty. We're gritty couple.
You both have grit. You both are. The theme of our show is never be outworked, and it's a marriage is like that. Now, what I think you guys probably see is a lot of people say this: relationships are work. Yes, they are, but they don't actually have to be difficult. When you learn to actually communicate with each other and you know the love languages of one another, it is the most beautiful, rewarding thing in the world. When you actually can talk to somebody without conflict, that might have been a foreign thing to you guys 10 years ago.
Mhm.
Yes.
Isn't that amazing when you can do that? And immediately then things really, really can repair themselves when you seek to understand. And so what causes, we hear about trauma, abuse, infidelity, addictions. What causes couples to stay together with all that trauma? These are probably not scientific questions that can be answered, but Kelly, I want you to take that one. Why you just, because you gave up? What if, are you see that similar to other people that they just say, this is as good as it gets, and that's marriage?
Yeah. And I think different generations too, what they're taught too. I mean, I know quite a few from my parents' generation who, yeah, you don't go get therapy because that's weak. And so you just grin and bear it, and this is your lot in life. And there's a lot of emotional affairs in that generation. A lot. Not that there aren't in our generation too, but I feel like our generation, we're a little bit more free to go get therapy, and it's not necessarily seen as a weakness.
Right.
So
And they wind up sleeping in separate bedrooms and
absolutely.
coexisting, but they're not divorced. But they're certainly not married either.
Yep.
Yeah. And in some ways that was just acceptable. And I don't see it that way at all. I don't see it that way at all. This has been wonderful. We are running out of time. I'm probably going to have you guys on again. This is absolutely phenomenal. I do want to ask you guys, my last question on this podcast, because our theme is never be outworked. And I don't believe in failures at all. And I'm an optimistic guy. I believe in the that people can do good and always do better. And so I don't believe in failures. However, sometimes externally on the outside, or sometimes even internally, when we reflect, we think we've had a failure in life. And I just look at this as learning experiences. But I want to ask Kelli first, and I'll get to Aaron. Kelli, just describe one potential failure that you might have thought it was a failure, or somebody on the outside would have thought it was a failure, but it ended up giving you more success in the end. Do you have one?
Yeah, we were talking about this yesterday. I think I'd rather have you go because I'm sure there is something. I'm coming up blank. I'm sure there's plenty.
Okay, Aaron, go. And if it can be related to relational, even in your marriage, especially, that would even be better if you can do that. If not, make it anything.
Yeah, so there's several pieces that come to mind relationally. I think we failed at communicating well, and yet we kept at it long enough for it to get figured out. I think we're still working on it, but better at not reacting so strongly when the other side communicates poorly. Which I think that was every sentence was a potential fuse for a powder keg, when things were not good.
Right.
So you better say every word correctly or I'm going to lose my marbles.
Right.
And I think having those kind of where we kept hacking at it until we got some things figured out.
Yeah.
I think I would say that people who were on the inside of our relationship that didn't have as a close a commitment to the Lord as we did, would often think that us staying together was a mistake. Like, you guys are just not getting it. You're not making it happen. And I was like, because it's her fault. And
exactly. I laugh and jest because you guys have inspired, and you've actually gone over the top. And I think that's why I laugh, because you guys are together. Otherwise, it's not. I get it why you would think that, and I'm sure she thinks the same way. It's like, why isn't he understanding me?
Yeah.
Why is he forcing me to go to therapy? Why is he asking me about? I totally get it. I totally get those things. Somebody told me, actually, in therapy, in my own therapy, they said many people, and it's usually at about year 20, and it just so happens it's usually when our first child leaves the home, that they say at year 7, they call it the 7-year itch, and it's about communication. And if you don't get that communication figured out, then, which it sounds like you guys didn't, then at year 20, things explode. And it just so happens that usually it's when our first child's about leaving the home or whatever. But here's what he says, and he sees this all the time. Aaron, actually, I'm telling you this, both of you, and people usually give up right before it really gets good.
Yes.
What happens? And it sounds like that's what you guys were at. I mean, imagine if you would have thrown that all away and thrown away your family, your 4 kids, your being together, your grandparents. We all know what divorce does to families. Does it destroy them? Not necessarily. It doesn't have to be that way, but it certainly changes the dynamic, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like you guys were just that one more axe pick away from finding gold, and you guys survived that. You know what? I'm proud of both of you. It is an honor to have you on my show, and I really, really appreciate it. I got to get to these Facebook comments. Nobody called in. They probably didn't have the guts, but you know what? I guarantee you can reach out to the church's website that Aaron's a part of, and you can reach out to Kelli and Aaron that way. And if you want to talk to them, if you want to DM me as well, I will put you in touch with them if you want to, and I'll make sure Aaron's okay with that and Kelli's okay with that. But they want to inspire and change people relationally, one person at a time. And they are absolutely doing that. They're not doing that, they've done it, and they continue to do it. So thanks for being on my show, Kelli and Aaron. It has been just great. We're going to edit this and revise it a little bit. My nephew is my computer generated expert guy, and he did a great job, and we'll have it go live on all of our platforms next week, so you guys can see it then. It has been great. So thank you very, very much. I want to give another shout out to my listeners and my viewers. I have reached in the last month, in just about a little over a month's time, 100,000 engagements
Wow.
Wow.
on social media.
That's
And
awesome.
that I don't know what I'm doing. I guess it might be a little bit popular, but thank you very, very much. I really, really appreciate it. We're going to have some good shows coming up about intimacy, about relationships, about nutrition, about bodybuilding, about coaching. We're going to have one of the best team coaches in the world. I'm a wrestling coach that I'm inspired by and passionate about wrestling. So stay tuned. Kelli and Aaron, thank you very, very much. We're going to end this broadcast. You guys were amazing, and
Thank
we will
you.
talk to you soon.